to practice their faith without fear of government intrusion. Respect Life Ministries across the nation have a role to play to guarantee our rights are preserved. Working together, we can't keep constant pressure on an administration indifferent to our faith and our constitutional rights. It is important to understand that what brought us to this pivotal point in our nation's history. It started with the manner in which the Affordable Health Care Bill, known as Obamacare, was passed. The Health Care Act was a totally partisan piece of legislation that required backroom deals and altering of congressional rules. The deal to pass the bill in the House was cut between the president and a group of pro-life Democrats led by Congressman Bart Stupak. Representative Stupak and his cohorts agreed to vote yes on the bill after securing what they believed to be an executive order from President Obama assuring federal money would not be used to provide abortions under this unconstitutional piece of legislation. The bill eventually was passed in the Senate after leaders used a reconciliation procedure that demonstrated the backhanded, unscrupulous manner in which the Democratic Party was willing to stoop in order to impose universal health care on the American people. After the president signed the legislation, the vice president enlightened us with his eloquent use of the English language when he used a colorful metaphor to describe how big a deal it really was for them to shove this bill down the throats of every American, whether we wanted it or not. Hopefully, the Supreme Court will soon officially rule that this bill is unconstitutional. I have always been optimistic the Supreme Court would strike the bill down as unconstitutional. Whether they do or not, we can no longer say, we lost, let's accept this. It is imperative in order to secure our constitutional rights, the bill must be repealed in both chambers of Congress and signed by the president. The last thing we need as a nation is to have the bill sitting around waiting for the time when an unfavorable court will have an opportunity to revisit the legislation that's struck down or allowed to be fully implemented if affirmed. In order to repeal this legislation, the best scenario is for the Republicans to retain the House and build upon their majority, the Senate to be controlled by the Republicans with a 60-vote majority, and finally for a Republican president to sit in the Oval Office. I feel very optimistic about the Republican Party's chances to gain enough seats to control Congress and win the White House, but it would take another monumental election like the one that took place in 2010 to obtain a 60-vote majority in the Senate. I see two other scenarios that could occur. The first would require the Republican-controlled Senate to use a reconciliation procedure similar to what the Democrats used to pass the legislation in the first place, approving a repeal bill originated in the House. That would send the media and the Democrats into fits. They would probably report that this was an egregious act of a partisan group of right-wing fanatics and had never been done in the history of this country. Unfortunately, some would believe them. The other scenario would happen if President Obama were reelected. That would help us. However, both chambers of Congress would be controlled by Republicans with a veto-proof majority to overturn any veto that the president tried to use to block or repeal his signature legislation. For my part, I will continue to do what I have been doing since before this legislation was passed, and that is pray and speak out against this bill. If any of the scenarios I mentioned were to fail, then our nation better prepare for a fundamental transformation only seen in countries that had their freedoms taken by the whims of despots and dictators. We are no longer in times when we can take for granted that people we send up to Washington, D.C. will serve as patriots and stewards of a great responsibility. They are no longer the defenders and advocates of our constitutional rights and liberties. We are in times of Chicago politics, when the dead have more rights to have their voices heard, and taxpayer dollars are squandered on wasteful energy deals and lavish vacations and parties. When we vote for someone, we must hold them accountable for their votes, no matter who they are. And if that means keeping pressure on the White House and Congress to respect our conscience and our religious liberties, then that is what we must do. We must hold accountable the businesses and organizations that sought to benefit from the passage of this health care bill, such as AARP and the labor unions. In the case of AARP, they saw an economic benefit selling Medicare package as a direct result of supporting the passage of this legislation. This is a part of that Chicago politics known as money laundering. That is a part of the implementation and enforcement of this legislation. Here's how it works. AARP receives an economic benefit. In turn, they send campaign contributions to the president and the Democrats, which get used to buy votes. And in turn, they are awarded for providing benefits that go back to AARP, allowing them to make even more campaign contributions that keeps the money flowing in a circle that evolves around those who expect to gain the most. This scheme is not exclusive to AARP. The labor unions and Democratic Party have been doing this for years now. The labor unions take union dues from their members and make campaign contributions to the president and Democrats. The benefits return to the unions in the form of labor contracts and higher government salaries, which, by the way, the largest union in the country is the federal government union. Every time the Democrats call for an increase in minimum wage, it allows the salary of union employees to get increased. This contributes to more and higher union salaries from which to collect union dues that get sent to the Democrats in the form of campaign contributions. Are the unions in the AARP the only culprits? No. Has anyone heard about Solyndra and the green energy loans that cost the taxpayer dollars billions of dollars in federal loans to subsidize the president's failed ventures in junk science and clean energy? This time, the money is with taxpayer dollars. The president and his administration gave $500 million to Solyndra and millions of taxpayer dollars to other green energy and solar companies, which in turn went bankrupt. However, before they went belly up, they managed to make more campaign donations to guess who? The president and the Democratic Party. To add insult to injury, these energy companies now want the taxpayer to pay for bonuses to retain a few remaining employees left in the failed energy companies while bankruptcy proceedings take their course. This type of corruption was enough to set people's hair on fire when it was Enron or WorldCom or any other publicly traded company on Wall Street. When the government is responsible for doing this nonsense, where is the outrage? Why would we allow the people trusted to represent us in making decisions that affect our lives and liberties get away with greed and corruption? But instead, we will get in the face of bank officials and CEOs that sell stock on Wall Street using free market principles to raise capital that eventually creates a job, that benefits a family that pays taxes, to a government that spends way too much and usually in the wrong places. The implementation of this healthcare legislation will result in another money laundering scheme that has become a common part of Washington politics these days. Now the players involve taxpayers, insurance companies, the IRS, and the government union employees, and the recipients of campaign contributions. Has anyone noticed that when the president talks about jobs, it is always benefiting union or government jobs and not private sector jobs? For all those green energy jobs that were supposed to have been created and everything, they were meant for labor unions. Even with the healthcare waivers that were issued, there were campaign donors and friends of the president and his party. The labor unions were supporting the passage of the healthcare bill, but they were one of the first to seek a waiver from its implementation. This is how things work in a utopian society that fantasizes about the ideology of Karl Marx and his Communist Manifesto. The people of prestige and power receive all the benefits and favoritism while everyone else suffers. That is why we must not sit by and let someone else speak up for us, but rather we speak loudly, and the big stick we carry with the pencil we use in voting to set the direction of we want our country to take. And that is either the road to serfdom or the path of liberty and religious freedom that God guided the pilgrims on centuries ago, leading them to the Americas and a Christian nation that grew out of their faith and sacrifice. The Declaration of Independence states, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the issues. They should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. When those words were written by Thomas Jefferson, the inhabitants of the colonies of America were able to practice their faith for over 150 years, from the time when the Pilgrims escaped persecution for their religious beliefs in Europe, up until the time King George levied his oppressive tactics against the colonies, bringing persecution to the shores of America. Thomas Jefferson told us why such grievances would lead Americans to make such a declaration that would compel them to form a country of self-governance where rights no longer were granted to us from a king, but rather from our Creator. In order to support our declaration, the Constitution of the United States was ratified to tell Americans how we are going to preserve those rights. These rights in the Constitution are written in the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. The very first right listed in the First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It was no coincidence that our nation's founding fathers would make the right to religious freedom the very first right protected under the Constitution. It has been over 220 years since the Bill of Rights and the Constitution was ratified. Unfortunately, our nation is repeating past persecutions. The Respect Life Ministry of St. Mary Magdalene was compelled to stand up and take action to preserve two rights that have become entwined in an issue of conscience: life and liberty. A few weeks back, St. Mary Magdalene's Respect Life Ministry organized to take action and set up tables outside the church. We asked the participants of Mass to stand up and have their voices heard by signing a petition that would be faxed to both Senators Bill Nelson and Marco Rubio, and to our representatives in Congress, Sandy Adams and John Lincoln. In doing so, we were standing with Pope Benedict XVI, our cardinals and our bishops, as well as with many other faith denominations that recognize the threat to everyone's religious liberties. Cardinal Timothy Dolan is leading the fight to protect our rights. Cardinal Dolan sharply criticized the decision by the Obama administration, in which it ordered almost every employer and insurer in the country to provide sterilization and contraceptives. Never before has the federal government forced individuals and organizations to go out into the marketplace and buy a product that violates their conscience. This shouldn't happen in a land where the free exercise of religion ranks first in the Bill of Rights. We as Catholics are being told by the Obama administration and others of like mind and little faith that we have 1 year to come to terms with our conscience, to lie down and accept these conditions. This battle is not about contraception. It is about the preservation of our rights in the Constitution for this and future generations. I tell my children that the United States of America is a nation founded with faith. I have imagined what this country and the world would be like when a government tells people of faith how they exercise that faith. And it is a dark image. Please make your voices heard and keep the pressure on the President, his administration, and Congress, because this is about our rights to life and liberty. And without them, there is no happiness and most definitely no faith. Thank you, and God bless.
Listen, I just kind of want to open it up for question and answers. Anybody have any questions for Peter?
Yeah. I believe we're all of the same mind about the mandate, but how do we convince others, not just of other faiths, but even within the Catholic faith that may think that it's not such a big deal, or that we're getting too political, partisan the other way? Because you mentioned that before, that one of the possible ways of doing that would be for the Republicans to do the same maneuvering that the Democrats did to get it passed. How do we present this that it doesn't just come across as, oh, they just want the other party in power?
Well, I think most importantly, what we continue to do is, first of all, like I said, pray about this. Because the biggest part of the problem is that we've lost sight of who we're dealing with. And the people that are, I try to paint a picture of what's happening. They are organized. They are extremely well organized. And they have been putting this bill was written years ago. They have been trying to implement this bill in some form of fashion for years. And this doesn't go before Hillary here. This goes well before that. And the tactics that they used were partisan. But they have a media that protects them. They have a media that reports it in their manner, in their fashion, to their advantage. The Republicans want to keep the gloves on nice and, and make sure that they look like they're above the board. And that's what the objective is. It's always been, is to make it look like, well, not to make it look like, but to show the American people that we are better. And we are. And we need to just continue and organize in a way, in a fashion that allows us to just simply go out and do what we can do best. And that is to exercise our free rights and vote. And vote in people that we are going to hold accountable. We have to go vote in our primaries. We have to go pick out the people who are going. You know, Sandy Adams and John Mike are now being pitted against one another through this congressional redistricting. So we send up petitions to the both of them. And part of the problem isn't just the Democrats. Part of the problem is also Republicans. And it's who we send up there. We need to ask our politicians. We need to ask our representatives, what do you intend to do, and hold them accountable? We can't just sit there and, I know I painted this picture because this is reality. This is what is happening. This is a one-sided game that unless the people on our side, and there's people that are out there doing it, they're organizing, they're trying to get ready. And unless they go out there and do it, and we go out there and we make ourselves, who has the sticker on the back of their car?
Surprised?
Yeah. I can feel it because, I was the same way. But you know what I did? I went out and I stood before the church, outside the church, holding a sign from back in the Florida primaries. I was the only one out there.
What did you say?
For Rick Santorum. He just recently dropped out of the race, paving the way for Romney to become the nominee, basically, unless Gingrich decides to.
Like I said, Pete, you and I are of the same mind. I was also standing outside of my church with a sign, Rick Santorum in one hand, and the other hand said endorsed by Catholic Vote. But that's a Republican solution. What is the solution that we present to the Democrats and independents that are sitting in the pew next to us?
That's the problem.
How do you answer that?
Because the priests are bound to not to be not political. Because it's traditional, priests do not take sides. Religious do not take sides. That's probably a good thing. And so you can't say vote for this guy or vote for that party. All we can do, I think, is present the issues. In your folder is this latest from the USCCB. They came out with something 2 days ago. Well, and I noticed yesterday it came across on an email. Maybe some of you have seen the email that came from the diocese. Well, I extracted this for them, but this is a summary. This is a summary of what they said. This is not the whole statement from the bishops. This is simply a summary of what they said in there. The second paragraph down shows a link where you can click on that and get the full story. But it's doing what Peter was trying to do, and that was outline what's happening to the Catholic Church in terms of discrimination. being driven out of foster care and so forth. Discrimination in humanitarian care, they're pulling money away from the Catholic Church because we don't meet some of the standards.
I mean,
And you know what those are.
just to follow up, look at part of the example of what happened with the 2010 election. You would think, any normal person would think, hey, there's a political upheaval out there. And not just from, and then all of a sudden, it basically got pushed aside. We got ignored. Look what happened. Look at what they did. You know, I thought when Ted Kennedy's seat that he held for 40 plus years, you know, I always used to say, if I ever was of the mind to go up to Congress and run for office or whatever, something like that, one of the first bills I was going to pass or try to get passed or put up there, and it was all in satire, but was that the rest of the country could vote Ted Kennedy out of office. That was one of the first things that I thought I would want to do going up there. He loses his seat for the first time. Well, he didn't lose it. He passed away. But his seat went to a Republican who was supported by a group of people who basically were tired of what was going on. That was big. But what did they do? They just went this way and went off in another direction. They took a bill that was passed in the House. They needed that bill that they took, they had to put together like patchwork in order to make this bill, this legislation. So they have shown their true colors, what they're going to do. We have to realize, are we going to sit there and scream at the wind with these guys, or are we going to continue to do what we do, and that is put the pressure on them by voting, by doing what we must do. And if it means going to the other side on occasion because the guy on this side is not the right guy, then yeah, that is what we must do. But in this situation, we have to recognize that we are in a fight, and the fight is, right now, the fight is our faith, our life, our liberties, our sacred honor. I mean, these are not words that just be thrown about. That is what basically we come down to. And we need to hold these guys, every one of them, accountable.
And another problem.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to answer the original question. What are we supposed to tell people that are saying, well, aren't you just trying to get the other side elected or whatever? It's about the issues. It's about this country's freedoms. It's about the fact that we were founded under a rule of law, and the rule of law is not being followed in our judiciary, in our Congress, and in our executive branch. It's about progressive people moving in on both parties. And, you know, McCain's daughter is so progressive that you could put a P on her head, and nobody would believe it, but because of the media. But when McCain ran against Obama, I was really upset because of the progressiveness in his family, right in his family. You have to look at the direction the country's moving in general, and you have to be on top of things and know about our history. One of the best things to read as far as religious freedom is concerned is a book called American Gospel. It's by Meacham, and he wrote about Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill and a few others in another book. But American Gospel is about what is American Gospel? It's not any one religion. It's the fact that we have the freedom to preach the gospel in this Christian country, no matter what religion we're in, or not preach it at all. It's about American freedom. That's what American Gospel is. It's not any one particular denomination. And that is what the way our founders found this country. That are the protections they put in there. If you read that book, it tells you how the Declaration of Independence was argued over. And these guys were putting their life in their hands. They were enemies of the king. They were enemies of a lot of people right in the colonies. They laid their life on the line to start a government that was not oppressed, especially where religion was concerned. It's a very good book. It's a good history book. I have a book list out. If anybody wants it, I can send it to them. It's in my computer. If you give me your email. There's a lot of good history books out there, but if you don't know your history, and a lot of these younger generations don't know their history, public school's been dumbed down. If you don't know about how this country was founded, the three branches of government, and the issues, that's the answers you give to the people that you're talking about. Say it's not about this party or that party. It's about American freedoms. Or learn your history.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much.